All right, this is the first video in a series of videos to come on making the Workbench project. I'm super excited about this project with you guys. I just developed it and we're going to build one together. So this is a set. AJ has her legs ready to be glued up. Okay, so you guys all know that the legs are done in two parts. Okay, there's a short and a long, and that's because the leg, the one part of the leg, actually acts as a tendon that goes through the top of the workbench. Okay, so believe it or not, the end cuts are not super critical on the long one, but on the short ones they are. They have to be exactly square because that is where the top is going to come to rest. We want this to be, this part right here to be perfectly square. So before we go through this process, I'm just going to double check this with my square, and yeah, sure enough, that is like bang on square. I actually checked this before doing this little demo, and it's a hair out on the one end, and that's not the end of the world. But you'll notice I've put the slightly out of square end to the bottom because that can be trimmed after the fact, right? But we really want this top one here perfectly square because that's going to make sure that there's no gaps between the short leg and where the top sits, the workbench top sits on top. Okay, so there's that. So at this point we have two pieces that are completely trimmed to final dimensions. So in the case of the standard measurements, that's exactly 5 inches wide, 1.5 inches thick by 33 inches long, and the long one is 36. And actually you can leave just a hair there, 36 and a 16th or something, just so that it pokes through the 3-inch top just a little bit. When we do this glue up, because we're already looking at a finished dimension here, we have to be very careful how we do this glue up. So you know how glue is, it can slide around and then all of a sudden it gets out of whack, and then for us to trim that up we've got a leg that's narrower than we want. So we're going to use biscuits. I'm going to show you guys how to set up a biscuit joiner here. Not to add strength to this, but just for alignment. Okay, in this case biscuits, which are these guys right here, we're going to just use some little number 0 biscuits. These are just going to serve as alignment helpers for when we do the glue up. Okay, one more thing that you guys want to kind of take note of when you're matching up your pieces for your legs is just kind of match the two boards. You guys can see here that the grain looks kind of similar. The other side, the other edge, actually has a very quarter sawn look to it. There's all these rays that you see across. And that looks kind of neat, but we want to kind of make sure that those are matched up. So what we're trying to do is make a seamless joint as possible. We don't want it to be totally obvious that they're two separate pieces, right? We're trying to blend the look here as much as we can. So AJ, your pieces here are a really good example on matching this up. We want our two sort of similar grain looking pieces going the same way. Okay, so we're gonna lay out a few marks here for our biscuits. This is not a super precise process. There's a little bit of room to play in doing that. So I'm just going to take my pencil and come in from the bottom about, I don't know, 4 inches, and just put a line through both pieces. One about in the center and one closer to the top, maybe 4 inches from the top as well. And just so that I know where my matches are, I'm going to label this A and A. Because you're probably going to be doing this on all 4 of your pairs at the same time. So then your next pair of legs you would label B and B or something like that, just so that you know what goes together. Okay? So there's that. Our biscuits are now laid out, so we have marks where we're going to make slots for 3 biscuits to join in there. You can set your bench up with these little bench dogs here that can go in the holes, or you can just butt it up against the wall kind of with any of the benches around the perimeter, because when we're doing this, yeah, it's gonna kind of butt right up there. And actually I'm just gonna use another one here as well, just to give me a little bit more surface area for my fence on the biscuit joiner. Okay, so that's ready for that. I want to set the joiner up for you guys. This is a biscuit joiner. It's kept in this black case here right underneath the cupboard, right behind where Kobe is. There's really not a lot we need to adjust on here. Okay, this lock nut here, if we undo this, that moves our fence down. Okay, so it bottoms out perfectly at 90 degrees. We'll just snug that up. The next adjustment is this lock here, and when we loosen this one and crank this knob on the top, we can raise or lower the fence, basically giving our, see where the cutter comes out there? We're going to make the cutter come down fairly low in the board, just to kind of give us, I don't know, I just like making this cut fairly low. I find that it's a little easier to get the accuracy a little bit better when this fence is, there's a lot more difference here, I guess. So, I don't know. It's just a theory. Okay, make sure that there's no wood kind of jammed up or stuck along where the blade comes out, and we're good to go. Okay, oh, the last adjustment we also need to make is the depth, how far the blade comes out. So we're using number 0 biscuits, and we're going to turn this little knob on the side here to where it says 0. There's a little red line, it says 0 right there, and that's going to limit how far the saw comes out and does that cut. Okay, so let's plug this thing in. Safety wise, just like anything else in here, safety glasses. I like earmuffs too, just because I don't like loud noises. So there we go. So when I cut this, I'm just going to show you guys how this works here. So here's my mark. I'm going to line up this little red mark on the fence. It's also right at the spot where the blade comes out. I'm going to line that up right on, I'm going to kind of sight it right down there, right? Make sure that my fence is really nice and flat, feeling really good along that edge. I'm going to rev the saw up with the trigger right here and just slow and smooth push it in and pull it out and make sure that it's gone, you know, fully home inside there, and then that's it. And we're going to do that 6 times, and that's it. So here we go. Let's do a few cuts. Okay, it's that simple. Okay, now you guys can see here where those slots were cut. I'm gonna just give that a bit of a sort of just clean these slots out and make sure that there's no sawdust in there. And by the way, too, sometimes there's a little bit of a like a wood tag or flap that kind of sits on the end here right in the corner. Make sure that those are all fully broken off before you go to glue up. Otherwise that little piece will stick in there and prevent your pieces from coming up really nice and tight. Okay, so remember, we're going for a nearly invisible glue line here. Okay, so when this is glued in, we're going to glue your biscuits in. A little bit of glue on either side of the biscuit and a little bit in the slot as well. So those go in just like that. And then our other ones, steal that. Make sure these are all cleaned out. They go well. Okay, so before AJ glues this up, she'd make sure that there's absolutely nothing in here, preventing those pieces from coming up. Just going to glue the biscuits in. Both faces are going to get glued. All right, so you can just put a little glue squiggle on there and physically just use your finger and make a full spread, so the whole piece has to be covered with glue. Very, very thin layer, but make sure that it's all fully covered on both pieces, and that's the best glue up joint. Okay, very thin layer but full coverage. Right, and then those are just going to go, those slots are going to fit together, just like that, and our marks are going to line up. Right, make sure that we're flush on the bottom, and then these can be clamped together. Right, and those biscuits are going to prevent these pieces from squishing around and moving out of alignment. Okay. Also, because this is quite a wide piece, right, it's 5 inches, we want to use quite a few clamps on here. I know if a bunch of you guys are gluing up at the same time, we may run out of clamps, but in all honesty, we're going to use pipe clamps primarily, and we should be using like probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, probably, at least probably like 7 clamps, honestly, on one of these. Okay, they don't have to be like smoking tight, but you want nice equal pressure everywhere, and you do want them fairly tight, but even pressure is kind of a big deal, making sure that all these ends come up really, really nice. We don't want to see the joint, right? We want to make sure that everything is flush. Okay, before the glue dries, the edges aren't a big deal because we can scrape them after, but we want to make sure that right in here, this is a finished piece of joinery. We want to take a wet paper towel and just make sure any glue squeeze out that happened in here, that we wipe that out really well. Okay, and so you guys are free to do this and to glue up and make 4 legs.